There's a moment, almost invisible, when keeping something stops being practical and becomes protective. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins with a receipt, a box, a stack of newspapers just in case. Then one day, the door doesn't open all the way. The floor disappears, and what looks like chaos to the outside world feels to the person inside it like survival. Hoarding is not a story about mess. It is a story about fear, about attachment, about the brain's desperate attempt to manufacture safety in a world that once felt unsafe. Today, we are not judging the clutter. We are dissecting the psychology behind it. What drives it, how it escalates, why it resists logic, and why simply cleaning up rarely solves anything. Because hoarding is never about the stuff. It's about what the stuff represents. Hoarding disorder is recognized as a distinct psychological condition, but long before it received clinical classification, history documented its presence. From reclusive aristocrats filling estates with decaying relics to post-war families stockpiling goods during scarcity, hoarding has always emerged in environments shaped by instability. The pattern is consistent. Where uncertainty grows, accumulation follows. Modern neuroscience confirms what historical patterns suggest. When individuals who hoard are asked to discard personal possessions, brain imaging shows heightened activity in areas responsible for threat detection, error monitoring, and emotional salience. In simple terms, their brain does not experience discarding as neutral. It experiences it as danger. This is where the misunderstanding begins, because to the outside observer, an object is either useful or it is not. But to the hoarder's nervous system, usefulness is not the metric. Safety is. To understand hoarding, we must understand three psychological forces that interact with escalating intensity: threat sensitivity, attachment distortion, and control compensation. When these forces combine, clutter becomes infrastructure. Threat sensitivity, when letting go feels risky. The first driver of hoarding is amplified threat perception. Most people discard items with minimal emotional friction, but individuals who hoard often experience exaggerated what-if projections. What if I need this later? What if I can't afford to replace it? What if throwing it away is a mistake I regret forever? The brain treats uncertainty as potential loss, and loss activates pain networks similar to physical injury. Research shows that decision-making around possessions in hoarding individuals produce measurable stress responses, elevated heart rate, increased anxiety markers, cognitive overload. This explains a crucial pattern. Hoarding is not impulsive. It is avoidance. Avoidance of making a wrong decision. Avoidance of irreversible loss. So the safest decision becomes no decision. An indecision, repeated thousands of times, accumulates into physical mass. The clutter you see is the physical residue of postponed decisions. Attachment distortion, when objects become identity. The second force is attachment distortion. Humans attach meaning to objects naturally. A wedding ring, a childhood toy, a letter from someone gone. But in hoarding psychology, this attachment generalizes. The object is no longer symbolic. It becomes fused with identity. Throwing away an item can feel like discarding a memory, or worse, erasing evidence of existence. This pattern intensifies after bereavement, divorce, financial collapse, social isolation, trauma exposure. When relationships feel unreliable, objects become stable. They do not argue, they do not leave, they do not reject. Possessions begin serving as emotional regulators. The cluttered space becomes a psychological archive. And this is where outside intervention often fails, because removing objects without addressing attachment feels neurologically like relational loss. It is experienced not as cleaning, but as violation.
control compensation, creating order through accumulation. The third driver is control compensation. Hoarding frequently intensifies during periods of powerlessness, economic instability, health decline, loss of autonomy, institutional distrust. When external systems feel unpredictable, internal systems expand. Controlling possessions becomes a substitute for controlling life. Deciding what stays becomes an assertion of agency. Ironically, the space may appear chaotic, but psychologically it feels structured. The person knows where things are. They recognize patterns in what others perceive as randomness. In this sense, hoarding becomes adaptive at first. It reduces anxiety temporarily. It increases perceived preparedness. It simulates control. But over time, the strategy collapses under its own weight. Fire hazards increase. Mobility decreases. Social isolation deepens. Shame intensifies. And shame is the accelerant. The shame cycle and why forced cleanouts fail. Hoarding is often hidden. Many individuals are acutely aware that others would disapprove. This awareness produces secrecy. Secrecy breeds isolation. Isolation increases reliance on objects, and the cycle tightens. When interventions occur abruptly, landlord pressure, family ultimatums, emergency removal, they frequently backfire. Why? Because the core drivers remain untouched. Threat sensitivity persists, attachment distortion remains, control compensation intensifies. Without psychological recalibration, the behavior reemerges. This is why evidence-based treatments focus not on trash bags first, but on cognitive restructuring, challenging catastrophic predictions, reducing perfectionistic decision thresholds, building tolerance for uncertainty, reestablishing relational safety. Real change occurs when discarding no longer feels like danger. The cultural dimension, scarcity, and modern consumerism. There is also a broader context worth acknowledging. We live in a culture of excess, mass production, constant marketing, algorithmic persuasion. We are trained to accumulate. Scarcity narratives still shape generations, especially those who lived through economic depression, migration, or war. In that environment, hoarding is not irrational. It is an amplified survival instinct in a world that once punished scarcity. Understanding this does not excuse risk, but it reframes it. Hoarding is not moral failure. It is a coping mechanism that exceeded its usefulness. If this analysis changed how you see hoarding, share it, because understanding reduces stigma, and stigma keeps people trapped. And if you want deeper dissections of the psychology behind complex human behaviors, subscribe. We don't simplify the mind here, we decode it.